If you believe that setting targets gets you results as a leader, oh, do I have a video for you. Let's talk about why that doesn't work like you think it does and what trap you are falling into. Let's go. Let's start out with a weird question. Would you trust the fuel gauge in your car if you knew it wanted to make you happy? I mean, think about it. Could you trust the amount of fuel in your tank if you knew that your fuel gauge was trying to improve your mood? If it knew that you would be angry if it showed low or happy if it showed full, it would likely show you full, even when the tank isn't full at all. I think we know that we wouldn't be able to trust it under these circumstances, right? We don't want this kind of behavior from our gauges. All we want is accurate, timely information so we can monitor what's going on with the car and make better decisions. Most leaders I work with claim to want the same thing from their metrics, just the facts, ma'am. But then they ruin everything. They put targets on those metrics because they think that's what leaders do. That's when they unknowingly destroy the measurement. This phenomenon is known as Goodhart's law, named after the British economist Charles Goodhart, who coined the term in 1975. Goodhart's law says that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a useful measure. Breaking this down, Goodhart is saying that when a target is set on a metric, the workforce will begin figuring out how to reach that target. You might be thinking, yeah, that's what I want to happen. It's why I set targets in the first place. I mean, it seems simple, right? Set some targets, incentivize those targets with either sticks or carrots, and then let people reach those targets so they get the reward or avoid the punishment. Seems like leadership 101, and that's why it's a huge problem. See, people are clever, and when you incentivize them to reach a target by either rewarding or punishing them, they will reach that target, making all kinds of compromises and trade-offs about things you weren't expecting them to make and probably won't like. The classic example of Goodhart's law is the nail factory example. If you measure people on the number of nails made, workers will take the fixed amount of time and metal they have to make you thousands of tiny and useless nails. Hey, they exclaim, you said make as many nails as you can. So you figure, okay, I'll fix this. You say, hey everyone, we're not measuring you on the number of nails you make anymore. Now we're measuring you on the weight of the nails. Now workers begin taking the fixed amount of time and metal they have to make you some giant-ass nails that are equally useless. If this example seems contrived, let's look at an actual example I've seen at a client of mine. This client tried to get the development teams to move faster by setting a target on a measure called cycle time. If you're not familiar with that, it's basically the time it takes to finish work from the moment it's begun until the moment it's finished. In this company's case, the clock started when a team's user story was put into the development column and stopped when it was put into the done column. I have a separate rant that I'll save for a future video about why we make a big mistake trying to apply some of these metrics rooted in manufacturing to knowledge work like software development. But let's not digress here. So, back to the story. The CTO of this company decided that to get teams to move faster, he would place a target on cycle time. It's important to note here that he framed it as an objective and key result, or OKR. The OKR process is where I often see Goodhart's law surface more than anywhere else. His objective was to reduce cycle time, and he set a key result of a 5% reduction by the end of the quarter. Now, as a side note, this company had huge systemic problems that were the primary cause of their slowness. It wasn't the teams. It was the systems the teams were trying to coexist inside of. So this leader also fell into a trap of ignoring the system. Systems thinking is a leadership topic for a later video. Now, this company had a lot of unintentionally counterproductive policies, and one of those was hard ranking employees every year at the performance review time. Each year, managers entered into ranking Hunger Games where they would fight with their peers to get higher rankings for their employees. Attached to these higher rankings were bigger raises, promotions, and potentially more stock options. So what do you think happened in this environment when any target was set by the CTO? Who here guessed that it would ripple down to each of the CTO's direct report chain as a commandment rather than a goal? Each manager down the line saw meeting the goal from the CTO as a feather in their cap for their ranking, so a target became a commandment. They demanded a 5% reduction from their directs, who demanded it from theirs, all the way down to the teams. To understand the ensuing dysfunction at the team level, let's illustrate how they did work before they were asked to cut cycle time in a simplified example. The team used to build, quality check, and deliver value every sprint. For illustration purposes, let's assume that that process takes 9 seconds. In reality, this is more like days, but I'm just illustrating the point. After the CTO's proclamation, everyone on the teams began figuring out how to game the system. So I would visit one team and see that they had decided maybe they don't need to do such a thorough job during the quality check. Sure, that means more defects, but those defects will come in as new work with a new cycle time, see? And since they'll fix it quickly, it'll contribute to a lower average cycle time for the team. Brilliant. Hey, look at that, cycle time down by 2 seconds. Another team decided that instead of writing a single story that delivered value, they would divide that value into 2 or 3 dependent stories. Of course, now it takes multiple stories and maybe even multiple weeks to make anything the customer would find valuable, but look at that cycle time reduction, another 2 seconds shaved. A third team had the scenario where during peer review, the reviewer pointed out that the story was working, but the way that it was implemented was going to mean rework in the following iteration, and the developer should make some minor tweaks this iteration to prepare for that one. The developer replied, "I understand, but I can't, because that would increase our cycle time." So this team actually created technical debt to meet the 5% reduction in cycle time target. Each of these behaviors from teams do, in fact, reduce cycle time, and nearly every team achieved that 5% reduction, wouldn't you know? But now quality was down, tech debt was up, and customers were waiting 2 to 4 weeks longer for anything of value to show up. So, yay? A very important part of Goodhart's law is the final part. It ceases to be a useful measure. Once people have begun gaming a metric, that metric is now pretty much useless at that company. A bit like that fuel gauge you no longer trust because it showed you with a quarter tank as you sat stranded on the side of the road with an empty tank. You'll never trust it again. Goodhart's law has a loophole, however. When teams set their own targets on these measurements, they rarely game them. This makes sense, right? If I set the target and then I game the system to make the target, I'm only fooling myself. It's a bit like cheating at a solo round of golf. What's the point? When targets are set for me, gaming begins, especially when my bonus or commission is on the line, or I'm promised a bad time if targets are not met. Okay, another law worth talking about that is related to measurement is Campbell's law. The law was created by psychologist and social scientist Donald Campbell, and it says, the more any quantitative social indicator is used for social decision making, the more subject it will be to corruption pressures and the more apt it will be to distort and corrupt the social processes it is intended to monitor. Campbell originally created this law to address social policy for things like standardized testing in education. He was making the point that the more we attach important decisions about something to the results of something we measure, the more likely the entire process involved in what is being measured will be corrupted and distorted. If a school's ability to get funding to hire more teachers is dependent on test scores from kids, then teachers become pressured by administrators to teach to the test, which distorts the very thing we're measuring, how kids are learning. Campbell's law applies to many business situations as well. Look no further than the obsession with share price. Huge decisions are made at companies that affect hundreds or thousands of lives based on this one number. While companies have to adhere to generally accepted accounting practices, or GAAP, there are many ways to game that system that can cause the share price to go up, like replacing a bunch of full-time employees with contractors or leased employees. Looks better on the books. So does doing layoffs or trimming the fat, with the fat in this case being human beings who are now unemployed. Or buying back shares instead of increasing wages. These are short-sighted decisions, but in the gaming of GAAP, the share price goes up, and decisions like these make total sense. That's Campbell's law at work. All right, let's talk about snakes, specifically cobras.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
Goodhart's law usually incentivizes one outcome, and we get it at the expense of others. But sometimes we don't set targets at all. We just try to reward a behavior we want, hoping it will achieve an outcome we want. When our rewarded behavior gets gamed by people and ends up making the problem worse, that's called the Cobra Effect. This is based on a parable about colonial India. The government wanted to reduce the number of cobras, so they offered a bounty for every dead cobra turned in. Of course, this led enterprising citizens to begin breeding cobras to collect the bounties. Once the government caught on, they canceled the program, causing the breeders to release their cobras because who wants captive cobras? Which led to more cobras than before the program. There are many other examples of the Cobra Effect that you can search for if you search for that phrase online. Goodhart's law, Campbell's law, and the Cobra Effect are leadership traps that set off a lot of dysfunctional behavior in our organizations. So, why are they so common? And why are they so easy to fall into? Well, we have a general misconception that people are universally motivated by sticks and carrots. And for some very narrow situations, it's true. People are usually motivated by sticks and carrots when the behavior you're trying to change is a rote, repetitive activity like production line work. But it doesn't work for knowledge work. In fact, studies show that sticks and carrots actually harm performance in knowledge work. I'll link to a video from Daniel Pink that discusses this in more detail in the description below. So here's how you avoid these traps. 1. Let teams set their own targets. As a leader, you can explain the outcome you're going for, not the output, the outcome. If you're not clear about the difference, there's another video that explains that. Check the description below for a link to that. Resist the urge to attach specific numbers to those outcomes. Speak to the direction you want the metrics to go without putting a target on them. For example, our CTO from before could have said, I want to see the teams moving faster. Try to get your cycle time down and let us know if there are systemic issues slowing you down as well. If the teams set their own targets on cycle time, they won't game them. 2. If you must set a target, choose a measurement that cannot easily be gamed. Remember, people are clever, so these may be hard to find. But as an example, the federal government's requirement that vehicle manufacturers increase miles per gallon to 43.5 by 2032. There's only 2 inputs to miles per gallon, miles driven and gallons consumed. Placing a target on either of those 2 can easily be gamed, but miles per gallon is a metric that cannot be gamed. The only way to make miles per gallon go up is to reduce the amount of fuel consumed per mile. 3. Avoid tying bonuses to targets. Don't try to use them as carrots to change behavior. It doesn't work. As Campbell's law illustrates, the more you raise the stakes on a measurement, the more that measurement will be gamed. Number 4, don't try to buy motivation. Earn it. Yes, it's harder work for the leader, but it pays off in ways you cannot predict or imagine. Don't fool yourself into believing that you can pull the right levers at the team level to achieve your outcome. Instead, do the leader work of getting teams excited about moving faster, kicking your competition's ass in the marketplace, and helping customers. They'll optimize speed on their own after that. Team members who are motivated and sold on the outcome you want will find more creative ways to achieve it than you can possibly imagine. And they won't game the system to achieve it. Let them use their brains rather than just being a set of hands connected to yours. Metrics are great tools to see if we're achieving outcomes or not. But if you use them to manipulate behavior, you're just making a fuel gauge that goes from being accurate to wanting to make you happy. Avoid this trap. If you fall into it, you're breaking the very tools you need to run your business. If you enjoyed this video, send it to your leader from an anonymous email account and like and subscribe to be notified when new videos come out, usually every week. Thanks for watching.